Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here, welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, we have Ranking the Best Midfielders Part 2. I actually released Part 1 last week where I looked at the more expensive midfielders. In today's video though, we're looking at the midfielders that are £7 million or less, and there are 12 of them covered in today's video. If you are enjoying the daily content on this channel and you're not yet subscribed, please do consider subscribing, but without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, in today's video, I've selected the 12 best midfielders, in my opinion, that are less £7 million or less. Now, this is just my opinion, and I've missed out a ton of good options as a result because I'm only covering 12. One player that missed out very, very slightly is Kulusevski, who I do think will be an excellent option under Postecoglou. If you're wondering why he's not in this video, he probably would have been 13th. If I know that he's nailed under Postecoglou, then all of a sudden, I'd probably put him in my top 5 or 6 because his stats are never that bad. And again, he's another player that I think is really, really good as an FPL option. It's just at the moment, we don't know exactly what's going to happen there. And he is 7 million, whereas we've got Madueke here, who is 5.5. All of the statistics used in today's video, including the touch maps, the Opta statistics, discussion around the best fixtures, all of that has been powered by Fantasy Football Hub. If you would like to use the same site as me throughout the year, at the moment, they're offering 50% off if you use the link in the description, top line of the description. That means for as little as £3 per month, you can get access to all of the Opta statistics, touch maps, player comparisons, and also on top of that, you get your team rating, and you can look ahead to future game weeks as well. So do check them out, link in the description. In 12th, like I said, I've got Madueke. Only 5.5 million, and I do think he's being slept on slightly at only 0.8% ownership. The fixtures in the first two aren't great for Chelsea, but as we've discussed now for a few weeks, the fixtures do turn in Game Week 3. As you can see, Luton, Forest, Bournemouth in 3, 4 and 5. The fixtures definitely improve for Chelsea. It's just, I guess you don't need to start the season with a Chelsea asset as a result, and you could move to them in 3. But as I'll discuss later in the week when we do some other videos, I don't like the idea overly of booking in transfers. And as a result, if you can start the season with a player that has a nice fixture swing, it can be a nice advantage. The issue is he wasn't at all nailed last season, an average of 53 minutes per game, and his non-penalty expected goal involvement was 0.34. So this is a player that didn't get any minutes, and when he did play, his statistics were pretty poor. I do just want to address something with the statistics that I use. I use statistics per 90. That means that if a player plays 90 minutes, these are the statistics that they put up. The issue is a lot of players don't play 90, so their stats might look good, but if they're only playing 60 minutes on average, then their stats aren't as good as they look on paper. Then some people say, well, why don't you look at per appearance? The issue with looking at per appearance is you start to get into issues of whether they were coming back from injury or maybe they were just going through a spell where they weren't starting. So what I tend to like to do is look at per 90 stats and then use the caveat that you should look at how many minutes they tend to play on top of those per 90 stats, if that makes sense. So not only were his stats bad per 90, basically, he's also only getting 53 minutes on average. But I do think under Pochettino, he'll get more minutes. Let me know down below if you're a Chelsea fan. As far as I'm aware, you don't have many right-wing options, and it's probably going to be Madueke or Sterling, but Sterling is much better on the left. So I think the two starting wingers for Chelsea should be Sterling and Madueke, but I would love to know what you think down below in the comments if you're a Chelsea fan. At 5.5, he could be a steal. For me, he probably is a wait-and-see at the moment, though. In 11th, we've got Jared Bowen, scoring goals for fun in pre-season and getting assists too. We saw what he can do in FPL a couple of seasons ago, but by all accounts, when you look at his stats, quite disappointing last season. The thing that I like about Bowen is he's very, very nailed for West Ham. His stats are very consistent, albeit slightly underwhelming at points, and he's on set pieces a lot too. As you can see, he's in swinging corners, not out swinging, but he's in the in swinging corners. He takes a few free kicks. Unfortunately, I don't think he's on penalties at the moment. I think it's Ben Rama and Skamaka that are ahead of him, but I do like that he's got a few routes to points, and in general, he's the sort of player that you would expect to slowly tick along for 7, and he does have that explosive ability. So if he continues to score goals in pre-season, by all means, consider him. I'm trying to not give too much attention to pre-season because I feel like it can sell us a false narrative. We saw Neto last season, smashed it in pre-season, and I'm pretty sure he went on to not score a single goal in the Premier League. So this can happen with players that they have a really strong pre-season, but I don't think we should pay too much attention to that. These are, for me, two wait and see. I think neither of them have given me enough last season that I want to start the season with them, but both of them at points, I can almost guarantee it, will be really, really good value. So we've got 12th and 11th. I like them both. Not quite good enough to sneak into the top 10. So let's take a look at the top 10. So in 10th and 9th, we have Mason Mount and Pascal Gross. Two decent options, and I wouldn't have an issue with you starting with them, but for me, they are not close enough to my starting 11 to consider them. We'll start with Mason Mount. I think the fixtures for Manchester United are a bit of a mixed bag. I do like the idea of Wolves and Forest at home in the opening 3. I think they are two sides that can definitely be got at, and I think we will score goals against them. And to be honest, Tottenham away is not a terrible fixture, depending on how they set up under Postecoglou. But from an attacking perspective, I don't mind those opening 3 fixtures. My issue with Mason Mount is I just don't know exactly what he's going to be like at Manchester United. So I'm a Manchester United fan. I think by all accounts, it looks like we're going to be lining up in more of a 4-3-3-ish with 2 number 8s as opposed to 2 in the pivot and then Bruno Fernandes in the number 10. So I think Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes will both play this number 8 role. And what that number 8 role entails at Manchester United is getting the ball and carrying it, which I think Mason Mount is very, very good at, and then covering the other one when the other one goes further forward. So I think if Bruno Fernandes goes forward, we'll expect Mason Mount to sit slightly. And if Mason Mount pushes forward, we'll expect Bruno to sit slightly. I do suspect, based on what we saw at points last season with the likes of Fred and Bruno and Eriksen and Bruno as well, there will be one of them that is told to sit slightly deeper than the other on average. So what you'll see is one number 8 is kind of like here, and then one number 8 is slightly lower. I don't know at the moment whether that will be Mount or Bruno that's expected to sit slightly deeper. But by all accounts, I think Mason Mount will get the opportunity to create goals and to score goals as well. It's just whether he will get enough to compete with some of the other really good options in and around that sort of 6.5 to 7.5 million pound price point. And at the moment, I just don't think he necessarily will. For Chelsea last season, his stats were ridiculously bad. I mean, I was looking at these and they are so poor. He was putting up a non-penalty expected goal involvement of 0.28. I had to double check that like 3 times. They were really bad. I don't expect them to be that bad for Manchester United, but that puts me off because I think Mason Mount generally has just never been a massive goal threat, and he's never shown elite underlying data. When we look at the likes of a Raheem Sterling, who we'll look at later in the video, he is a goal scorer, and he gets so close to goal for exactly the same price point. Mason Mount just doesn't ever seem to get close enough to goal to get the goals on a consistent basis. As you can see by his touch map, he barely touched the ball inside the box. So for me, I love Mason Mount. I'm so glad that Manchester United have signed him. I think he's exactly what we need in that midfield to progress the ball forward. But from an FPL perspective, I just can't see him being worth the money, in my personal opinion. Pascal Gross is a kind of similar situation that he doesn't get in the box enough, and he doesn't, as a result, get enough chances to score goals. So as you can see, his non-penalty expected goals is 0.16. His creativity is brilliant because, as you can see, he takes corners on both sides, and I absolutely love that. Mason Mount will have to wait and see if he takes corners off of the likes of Luke Shaw and Bruno Fernandes. But we know that Pascal Gross will probably continue to take corners. He takes a lot of set pieces too. And whether he's playing at right back, CDM in the 10, his stats are always relatively consistent regardless. He seems to just create chances on the pitch, and he's that sort of player. So I do think that Pascal Gross will probably hit 8 to 10 assists, and I think he'll probably hit 3 to 4 goals this season as a minimum, but that's not really enough at that £6.5 million price tag. Again, we're looking for those explosive options that will go out and get you a brace or go out and get you a goal on a consistent basis. And I look at Mason Mount and Pascal Gross, and I don't see either of them doing that. The one thing that I will say about Pascal Gross that I do like, and I think it's worth considering as a result, is in the absence of McAllister, who of course has now moved to Liverpool, Pascal Gross should be on penalties. Not 100%, it could be Welbeck. We could see someone else like a Matoma or Ferguson take it. But I think Pascal Gross should be on penalties. And therefore, whilst 0.43 for his non-penalty expected goal involvement is mediocre, when you add penalties on top of that, all of a sudden you're looking at a much better asset. So keep an eye on Pascal Gross. Let's see where he lines up in pre-season. Let's see how he does. But for me, I think I probably prefer all 3 of the other Brighton midfielders and their place later in the video. So for now, Mount and Pascal Gross in 10th and 9th. Let's move on to the top 8. So in 8th and 7th, we've got Dominic Szoboszlai and Morgan Gibbs-White. I'll start with Dominic Szoboszlai. I didn't watch a massive amount of him last season. I think I probably only watched in total like 120 minutes, I would say, of him playing. Always impresses me when I see him and when I see the highlights, and the underlying data looks okay too, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm an expert on him and I know exactly what he's going to be like in the Prem. Liverpool's number 8s do tend to get the chances to create goals and score goals. I think they play maybe a slightly more attacking role than Manchester United's number 8s, and I do expect him to be fairly nailed because they just don't have the squad depth, and they've been crying out for some pretty good number 8s for a while now. The underlying data that I got from FBref is pretty good. You can see 0.17 non-penalty expected goals is okay. 0.3 expected assists is very good, so he's creating a lot of chances, but we need to see what he does for Liverpool. So I'm not going to talk about him in massive detail here. Looks like a decent option. For me, it's a wait and see because I don't see the value in taking the risk because he doesn't look, from what I can see yet, like he's going to have a ridiculous upside where he's going to go out and get you 2 or 3 goals a game. So there's no real risk in just not starting the season with him, waiting. And if he does look good, then you can move to him because he's at a really nice price point, especially when you consider you can get Luis Diaz for 7.5. I'd probably rather take the risk on his minutes than picking Soberslide myself. But I like him. He's in an 8th. I wouldn't have an issue if you want to take the risk. In 7th, I've got Gibbs White. And I'll be honest, I would be very tempted to have him in my Game Week 1 team if the fixtures were better. And for me, the fixtures just aren't quite there. Unless I'm in a position where I'm looking for like a 7th or 8th attacker that I rotate in and out. If I'm looking for a player that I don't play every week, then I do like Gibbs White. But 6 million is a lot to spend on someone that you'll bench for probably 2 or 3 of the opening 5 fixtures. Do have 2 really good home fixtures in there. So they're playing 2 of the newly promoted sides at home, and we know how good they are at the City ground. But having 3 away fixtures in the opening 5 against Arsenal, Man United and Chelsea, it's just a little bit too tricky for me. And the stats are not particularly good for Gibbs White. So despite the fact that his output was very, very good last season, the stats just aren't quite there. You can see a 0.36 non-penalty expected goals, goal involvement. Let me know down below, Forest fans. I think Gibbs White could be / should be on penalties. If that is the case and he is on penalties, then again, it makes him a much better option. As I said with Pascal Gross, you go from having an okay player to, yes, he's still an okay player, but the addition of penalties, if he grabs 4 or 5 penalties a season, then that really, really helps, especially if, of course, they finish the penalties. So I like Gibbs White. It's more of a vibes pick. Like, whenever I watch him, he passes the eye test. I think he's an exciting player. I think he will continue to improve. He's that talisman now for Nottingham Forest. It's just, is he going to improve on that underlying data, and is he going to get more chances to score goals this season? So I like both of these. Maybe a little bit too far when you consider there are 6 better options in my opinion. So let's take a look at those 6 options. So we are starting to move towards my favourite options in and around these price points now. And in 6th and 5th, we have Eze and Solly March. I think both of these are great options. Both at points have actually been in my team. At the moment, neither are in my team, but I will discuss the pros and cons of each. So Eze is a player, in a similar way to Gibbs White, is a bit of a vibes pick, because when you actually look at the data, it's not particularly good, and it doesn't tend to be particularly good for Eze. I think he's a very flashy player, and I think he looks good when you watch him. And as you can see by the touch map, exactly where that big red blob is towards like the attack, that's where he does a lot of his good work. He picks up the ball relatively deep, carries it quite well, takes on a couple of players and lays it off to another player. But there's barely any touches. I mean, there are barely any at all touches in the box there. You can see it's almost completely blank, which is a bit of a worry, because you want your player to be scoring goals and getting the chances to score goals on a regular basis. And whilst his non-penalty expected goals isn't terrible at 0.22, that is accumulated by quite a lot of long shots, which we see from him. And he doesn't tend to get, as you can see, that many big chances. So you can 0.47 big chance involvement per 90 isn't particularly high. So I worry that he's just a very exciting player and a brilliant footballer, but he's never going to be an elite FPL option unless he changes the way he plays. What I would say around Eze is it looks like Zaha isn't going to sign a contract extension. And as a result, Eze is going to have to be that talisman for them if they want a talisman and they don't want to spread responsibility a little more. And as a result, we could see a slightly different Eze this season. I also like the fact that in Zaha's absence, and potentially even if he stays, Eze should be on penalties. And again, as we spoke about with Gibbs White and with Gross, that does add another string to the bow. So by all accounts, I like Eze as an option. I just worry that he's not quite the FPL option that we want him to be. Solly March is a different story, and Solly March is getting disrespected massively. I actually saw loads of discussions on Twitter the other day about the best £6.5 million midfielders. He wasn't even listed as an option, and I don't know if it's because people think he's still injured. He will look, by all accounts, it looks like he should be fit for Game Week 1. And his data last season was really good. And he was getting attacking returns too. And I know he was a frustrating own at points. And I know quite a few of those returns were just the odd assist. But I would not be surprised at all to see him outscore the likes of Matoma and Ciso and all of the other options in and around that price. Because as you can see, the stats are good. He's sitting at 0.69 non-penalty expected goal involvement. His expected FPL points last season were 5.69 per 90. And he's relatively nailed as well, 82 minutes per game as well. Big chance, he was involved in over 1 big chance per 90. So in every game, he's either creating a big chance or getting a big chance himself. And I know he's not the most prolific finisher in the world, but I really do think Solly March is getting disrespected in the community. I have not currently got him in my draft, because I actually don't currently have a Brighton midfielder in my draft, which sounds crazy when I'm going through these players, but I've just stacked my midfield with expensive options. But I will definitely be considering him. And if you are someone last season that liked Solly March, or you want to go slightly different to Matoma and you don't understand the hype, do consider him, because his stats are always good. He takes corners on both sides, as you can see, which is massive. He shares them with Pascal Gross. And I just like him as an option. So let me know down below if you've got Solly March, but only 3% of people have him in their drafts. He could be a mega differential with those opening 3 fixtures to start the season. So in fourth and third, I've got two players that is completely and utterly dependent on the minutes that they get. But assuming they both get decent enough minutes, I would say that they are two very exciting options that if you want to go slightly different, you could do in your teams. And Ciso maybe not that different because he's at 12.6% at the moment, but I think that's mainly his price point. Raheem Sterling, a pretty big differential, only 4% ownership. Sterling, I think people, again, he's a really underappreciated player. Under Pep, he scored goals for fun. Was it in the 2019-20 season? He was just bagging goals. And I know a lot of them were tap-ins, but he's a player that knows where to be at the right moment. Under Pochettino, I don't know if I would use the word nailed, but I think he will be first choice and get a lot of minutes. I think we will see an improvement. I don't think it'll be 68 minutes per game. I think that will increase to kind of 75 to 80 minutes per game. And I think he'll be the main man for Poch if he can regain the form that we saw at City. And the thing that I love about Sterling is, as you can see by his touch map in comparison to the likes of a Pascal Gross or a Mason Mount, he gets into the right areas. And I feel like under Pochettino, he'll do that even more. We see a lot of him arriving at the back post too. I just think this could be a huge season for Sterling. And at points, I think his most expensive ever price was 12 million. We are getting what is in his prime, and he is still at an age where he could be in his prime, a 12 million pound asset for 7 million. It feels like it could be a mega bargain. In a similar way to what I said with Madueke, though, game week 3 is where you really want to own Raheem Sterling. So you could start the season with someone else. For example, a Matoma with 0.5 in the bank or a Solly March with 0.5 in the bank, and then move to Sterling. But just be careful, just because if you have 0.5 in the bank and you've got a cheaper asset, you might not be able to make the switch straight away, because if Sterling rises in price or your player falls in price, it can be pretty tricky. But I understand you don't need to start the season. You could wait and see. But equally, if you want to get ahead of the crowd, I would not be surprised to see Sterling start the season strong. His stats last season were his worst stats in a few years, and they were still okay. He's still sitting at a 0.57 non-penalty expected goal involvement. And that was a bad season. Like, no one, even Sterling wouldn't argue, he had a poor season. And the stats were still really strong. In previous seasons, we've seen him sat at about a 0.7, 0.8 expected goal involvement. So I like Sterling. I like him as a player as well. I hope he has a strong season. And I think that he could be a mega differential if you want to start the season with a bit of a risky player. And I like his price point too. Julio and Ciso, like I said, slightly more highly owned than Raheem Sterling. Really strong fixtures to start over the first 3. And the main reason that I love in Ciso, if you look at his touch map, it's a GOAT. Like, he's literally created a GOAT with his touch map. So how can you not want to pick this man? And the thing about Enciso is his stats are just outrageous. Yes, he only played 40 minutes per game on average last season, so he was not first choice for the bulk of the season. But towards the back end, he was starting to be first choice. And the stats when he plays it, they're just crazy. You can see here his expected FPL points was 7.51 per 90. Non-penalty expected goals of 0.51. Expected assists of 0.272. So by all accounts, we're looking at a player that, if he can get 70 plus minutes on average, his stats are going to compete with some players that are about 7.58 million. He's putting up stats that are well and truly above that price bracket. The issue is, do we know that he's going to start? I think that Brighton could have real issues with rotation this year from an FPL perspective. We've got Matoma, March, Buonanotte, and Ciso, Ferguson, Welbeck, João Pedro. I've probably forgotten someone else on top of that. Pascal Gross playing the number 10 role too. They've got so many options, and they're in Europe. I just wonder whether it's too dangerous to try and pick a slight rotation risk on that Brighton side. Maybe someone like a Pascal Gross is the best bet, because you know they're going to play the most of their games. So I love Enciso and I love Sterling. If I could get confirmation that both of these would start every game, there's a good chance I'd have both in my drafts. Enciso would definitely be in my drafts just because of that price. And I really do like Raheem Sterling. So no surprise at all that in second and first, we have Bryan Mbeumo and Matoma. These are the two best options for me at 6.5 million. And to be honest, they're the two best options, like I said, from 7 million and below. And they probably could end up competing with the likes of Maddison, Foden, Martinelli at that slightly more expensive price too. And I was expecting the stats to be slightly worse for Matoma, because at points last season, the stats didn't look great for him. But across the season, they're actually very strong. And it's a similar situation for Bryan Mbeumo too. I will just point out once again that Brentford's fixtures are really good. I think a lot of people are looking at that Tottenham fixture in game week 1. It's not a green fixture, and on paper, it's not the easiest fixture. But after that, the fixtures are just absolutely excellent up until about game week 9, game week 10. So I do think that Brentford may be being slept on slightly, especially their defence, but also maybe Bryan Mbeumo. And I would expect, especially if he can grab a few goals in pre-season, that his ownership might shoot up more towards that of what Matoma's is. At the moment, you can see I just about prefer Matoma. He's just got slightly better data. I think he's a slightly better player and a slightly better finisher. And over the first three, I do prefer Brighton's fixtures. And Brighton just tend to accumulate more chances to score goals. So I feel like Matoma has more chance of being involved in that. However, if Bryan Mbeumo is on penalties, that is probably enough to swing it back in favour of him. We just don't know if he definitely will be. There is a chance that someone else in that starting 11 could take it. Although I do think for what it's worth that it should be Bryan Mbeumo. Maybe Thomas Frank gives us something in a press conference. With respect to the data between the two of them, we can see Bryan Mbeumo plays slightly more minutes on average, but FPL points and expected FPL points higher for Matoma. The underlying data is so close between them. You can see 0.33 versus 0.35 for expected goals, and then 0.28 versus 0.26 for expected assists. So by all accounts, they've got identical data when we're looking at assist and goal threat, and big chance involvement is almost identical at 0.98 versus 0.97. So when you're trying to separate the two of them, it can be pretty tricky. One thing that I didn't necessarily notice, because I do watch a lot of football, but you don't necessarily pay attention to these things unless you own them. I didn't realise Mbeumo was on corners as well, and apparently on some free kicks, you can see by his touch map, he does take corners from both sides. So on corners, some free kicks, maybe penalties, the talisman with good opening fixtures. Should I maybe replace Matoma in the drafts that I have him there with Mbeumo? Is Mbeumo a better option than Matoma? I would love to know down below in the comments. Maybe the biggest debate at the moment, if you can't get both of them. Do you prefer Mbeumo or do you prefer Matoma? Or let me know down below in the comments, do you have both? Because a few of my drafts have had two £6.5 million slots. But at the moment, I've got no £6.5 million slots. I've just got a really expensive midfield. But maybe that's silly because that price point does really look good for this season. So let me know down below what you think about these two assets. So guys, there you have it. That is the best midfielders ranked part 2. If you do want to see part 1 and you've missed it, it will be linked at the end of the video. You'll also be able to find it on my channel as well. And like I said, if you do want 50% off from Fantasy Football Hub during pre-season, do check out the link down below. They allow all of this to happen in these videos with all of the underlying data and the touch maps as well. So it would show some support for me, it would show some support for them, and you get a very, very good deal during pre-season too. If you have enjoyed today's video, please do drop a like on the video. Let's aim for 1,000 likes. And please do make sure to subscribe as well. We are trying to hit 80,000 subscribers before the start of Gameweek 1. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.